Well, hi, BookTube. Bill Ruttenberg here with the Ruttenberg Library. Wanted to come to you this morning with part 2 of the 800 subscribers Q&A video. I had a lot of fun with part 1. I thank everybody for your questions, and I thank you for the questions for part 2. So I wanted to go ahead and do this for you, and so let's go ahead and get started. The first question is from Amanda Schofield, and she says, congratulations. Her question is, if you could have dinner with one family in history, who would it be? And for me, Amanda, this is a no-brainer. I would most definitely have dinner with, now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, maybe it isn't a no-brainer. I'll give you my first initial answer, which is Abraham Lincoln, because Lincoln was an awesome storyteller. He could make you laugh throughout, throughout dinner, and so he would just be plain old entertaining. His wife, well, she was a little bit nutty, and that could probably be entertaining as well, or make you nervous, one of the two. And then his kids were always all over the place, which could be entertaining, but at the same time, I sit and think maybe that would probably annoy me. But I would really like to have dinner with Abraham Lincoln and sit down for a long evening by the fire. And so maybe not dinner, maybe sit by the fire and have a fireside chat with him, because I think that could be very, very entertaining. So my other one that just popped in my head was Thomas Jefferson. I would love to have had dinner with Thomas Jefferson. They say in the biography I'm reading, in the chapter that I read this morning, Jefferson was a very, very good host for dinner parties, and he put everybody at ease. He made you feel like you were the most important person in the world, and so I think he would be a pretty good one to have dinner with too. Not to mention all of the he's just an intelligent man. His conversation would be very entertaining if you're into intellectual stuff. The next question is from James Holder, and he says, congrats. How do you organize your books? So, James, as I had said in the part 1 of this video, I used to do it alphabetical by author last name. But because of when we had our second child, I lost my library room, so I wasn't able to really do that anymore. I had to kind of cram all my books into a small area. And so now how I've done it is put them where they fit if you're upstairs, and then on the shelf behind me, I've tried to do it a little bit by topic. So you'll notice these are all Civil War. These are, well, not all Lincoln, but a lot of Lincoln. I've got one for World War II, somewhere around there. But anyway, I've got it kind of by topic a little bit. So that's how I've been organizing. And these are the books I really want to get to soon. So for my TBRs, I've been picking stuff off of these shelves. Excuse me. The next question is from Jack Smith, and he says, I have a couple of questions. And the first one is, how are you doing? I guess I got to be truthful, folks. Right now, I am in quarantine for COVID. And so I am upbeat. I feel a lot better this morning. But I've got this nasty cough that won't go away. Wednesday, after I uploaded my video for part 1 on 800 subs Q&A, I kind of went downhill pretty quick as far as how I felt. I had a temperature. I had the chills all day. I could not get warm. I had 2 sweatshirt layers, and I was buried in 2 blankets, and I was still shivering. And I had that temperature, and I just didn't feel good. Excuse me. And yesterday, I lost my sense of taste and smell. Not 100%, but probably 90% lost it. And if you guys have followed the channel for very long, I like to eat. And so that was pretty depressing. But Jack, other than that, I am doing great. I'm doing wonderful. I'm trying to manage my classroom from home, and that's an adventure. Luckily, my sub that's in the classroom right now, he taught at my school for well over 40 years. I want to say 44. May have been 43 or 44 years. So he's got a lot of teaching experience, and I feel really good leaving my classroom in his hands. And if there's anything I left off of my lesson plans, I feel good about him filling in. So how am I doing? I'm doing well enough to do this video for you, but not well enough to be, running around and going outside. I was on my Voxer chats yesterday evening for my buddy reads, and I was telling them that yesterday was our first middle school boys basketball game, and in 18 years of coaching, I haven't missed a game, and I missed my very first game last night. And that's all sports, football, basketball, track, baseball, softball, whatever the sport is that I've been coaching. I hadn't missed a game, and I missed one, so that was kind of depressing. But yeah, luckily this morning though, I feel a little bit better. That headache that was at the front of my head, it was like right at my eyebrow region for the last 2 days. That just kind of went away. I'm a little foggy, but I'm doing all right, all things considered. It could be worse. So, his second question: what texts would you say people want to go? Would you say people that want to go into politics should read? Oh goodness! Of all the questions on here, I didn't write an answer for this one because I don't know. It would have to be a book about being kind to one another, and how to work together, because our politicians today do not work together very well. They aggravate me. I feel like they waste my money, my tax money, because they can't sit down, shut up, and listen to each other. They want to have, instead of compromising, they want to have everything, and you can't have everything in politics. And so I would find a book, I don't know one in particular, but I would find a book that deals with compromise and how to make things work. So the next question is from Bridget, and she says, I've got a few questions. Hope that's okay. Feel free to pick among them if you're sticking to one question per subscriber. Well, Bridget, I'll answer all of them. That's okay. So her first question is, Lincoln seems to be your favorite male historical figure. You're very correct in that, Bridget. But she asks, who's your favorite female historical figure and why? So I've got a handful of them here that I'm going to mention, and I'm going to do it by not decades, centuries. I'm going to do it by centuries. And so in the 1500s, I find Mary, Queen of Scots, to be an extremely interesting person to study. Just her whole life. I watched a show on TV called Reign, and yes, it's fictional, it's TV, but it really got me hooked into her life and got me reading about her. And I read a biography on her that I absolutely loved. It was by, I have another one by her, Antonia Fraser. And it was really, really good. And I was able to, sort out the fact from fiction when it came to that TV show, which was entertaining. The TV show was entertaining, but it did have some fictionalized drama in there, but it was really good. And her life was extremely interesting. For the 1600s, I find Anne Hutchinson to be a very a female figure who really stands out. She stood up to her male counterparts in Puritan New England, and it did cost her. She got kicked out of Massachusetts Bay Colony for speaking out against the men and trying to assert her rights, and they didn't really like that, and they kicked her out. But just for the context of things, I think she was amazing to be able to feel free to speak her mind like that. And I do have a couple of biographies that I have bought about her that I want to read that I just haven't got to, but they are on the agenda. For the 1700s, I would definitely pick Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams was, of course, the wife of President John Adams, and she was an extremely intelligent woman. She was a woman who liked to voice her opinion, and she was a very, very good helpmate for John Adams. Their letters back and forth, if you ever get a chance to read those, are extremely entertaining and very lively. They tell the story of that marriage. That's always one of the things that I say about George Washington is I wish that Martha had not burnt their their personal correspondence back and forth, because you don't get to know George Washington and Martha like you do other couples. And of course, Abigail and John, you have almost all the letters that they wrote back and forth, and it just tells a huge story. And she was not afraid to stick up for women in that time period. And the one that I always remember is Remember the Ladies, when she's talking to, she was writing to John Adams when they were going through the Declaration of Independence, and she's like, remember the ladies in this document. You men are not the only ones here. And their notes back and forth, they make me chuckle. But they were a very interesting couple who left us a lot to ponder. In the 1800s, and I owe this to my daughter Crimson, I think one of the fascinating figures of the 1800s is Clara Barton. She was, she worked for the Red Cross. She was a nurse who went to the battlefield, several battlefields in the Civil War, and she traveled all around the country and did various things. She was overseas at some of the battles, and she was at the Johnstown flood in Pennsylvania. She just did a lot of work, and she was a very interesting character. And then bring it into the 1900s, I find Rosa Parks to be fascinating. I think Rosa Parks, she did a lot for the civil rights movement, and she was very brave. I mean, to stand up to the men, stand up to I know it doesn't sound like much to stand up to a bus driver, but when you know that you're going to face arrest and you're going to get sent to jail, and I mean, that's a big deal, what she did for the Montgomery bus boycott and really kicking off the civil rights movement. So I always found Rosa Parks to be interesting. So her Bridget's second question was, who is your wife's and daughter's favorite historical figure and why? And do they read history books too? All right, so typically they don't read history books for the most part. That's just me. They do a little bit, but not very much. Now, I asked my 4-year-old Katie who's her favorite historical character. And honestly, she had no clue what I was talking about when I said historical figure. And I even gave her some examples, because she recognizes Abraham Lincoln and George Washington every time she sees a picture, or she's learning to read, and she has learned to identify the name when she sees it written. And so that's always kind of fun to watch, but she doesn't go out of her way to find a storybook about them. But we do have a series of Bible books upstairs, and she really likes reading about biblical figures and the stories that are presented with them. And so I'm going to go with that for her answer. My wife doesn't have a historical figure, but she does tend to like to read about the Holocaust. Now, I say like with a grain of salt. It's not that she likes it, but she tends to gravitate towards it. It interests her. And I say that, but with at the same time, you need to know she doesn't read about it all the time. She reads one book every 4 or 5 years on the Holocaust, because the Holocaust tends to depress her quite a bit. She gets really upset and sad. But I do know, she read The Diaries of Anne Frank, and she liked that book. And then piggybacking on my earlier, female historical figures, Crimson liked Clara Barton, and which is what really got me interested in it, was my daughter Crimson. She did a History Day project when she was in middle school, all about Clara Barton, and it was extremely interesting. I helped her, find some of her research and stuff. Didn't do it for her. She did all the research herself, but I kind of helped her find the sources and gave her ideas of where to go. I was just kind of her guide, and she did a lot of reading on that, and it really got me going. And so I ended up buying, I have a book on the shelf back there about Clara Barton that I hope to get to sometime in the near future. The next question on our list is from Animo Shoshin. I apologize for mispronouncing that. Congratulations on 800. My question is, do you think where you live affects what you like to read? And Animo, I most definitely think it affects what I like to read. And I'm going to piggyback on a video that Steve Donahue made a while back, a few weeks, maybe even a few months back, where he was talking about, the region that you live in affects your reading, what's available to you. And he was using the idea of, you live in the New England area, there is plenty of Revolutionary War stuff to read, which I absolutely love to read, but you don't see nearly as much of it here in the Midwest, because when you're in the Midwest, you see either Civil War or you see World War II. Those are your big ones that you see. And so for me, I've picked up on the Civil War because I enjoy reading about it, first of all, but also because that's the books that we tend to find a lot of around here. And it's really interesting. If you're here in Iowa, you definitely find a lot of books on the Union and the Union cause and that kind of stuff. But if you just go a few miles south, 7 miles south to the border in Missouri, and you go on into Missouri, and it's still Civil War stuff that you find, but you see a lot more Confederate stuff down there that you don't see here in Iowa. And so that's pretty interesting, I think. It does allow me to get both perspectives. Not that I would ever, agree with the Confederate side of things, but, to have a well-rounded historical view of it is important as a teacher. And so where I buy my books most definitely affects, what I'm liking to read, because that's what I'm finding a lot of. The next question is from Lisa Garrity. And she asks, do you keep a written or digital list of your books? And I'd actually answered this question earlier in the part 1 video, but I'll go ahead and answer that again. But yes, I do. I have of course I have an Apple computer, so I have a Pages document where I've got them all listed, but I have since taken that Pages document, put it onto a Google Doc, and I also have a Google spreadsheet where I keep all of the authors I have by last name, alphabetical, and then on the spreadsheet I go even further and I list not just the author's name and the book, but I also put the Dewey Decimal number, I put hardback, paperback, I put, the subject, and the copyright date. So I try to keep track of all of that information. Excuse me. So question number 2, how do you keep track of them? Well, the list definitely helps me keep track of them, especially if I'm trying to figure out if I've read something, because on my document that has all of the books on there, it's you can use, when you bullet stuff, you can use an icon, and one of the icons is a empty box, and then another icon is a box with a check mark in it. And so every time I read one of these books, so like when I finish my Frederick Douglass book, I will switch the icon from an empty box to a check-marked box to show myself that I have read that one already. I have not kept I haven't kept track of these as well as I have in the past. and I need to do a better job. I do okay with it, but this last year I bought a lot of books, and I didn't do a very good job of updating those lists. So one of these days when I get up the gumption, I'm going to go ahead and update that. I'm also pretty good, Lisa, at just mentally remembering what I do have. Occasionally I end up buying a double, but that doesn't happen very often. More times than not, it's books I don't have. And where I have trouble is when I come across an author who's written 20, 30, 40 books, and I can't remember, and if I'm trying to collect all of them, I can't remember which ones I do and don't have. That occasionally happens. But anyway, mental notes. Yep. That is if this COVID doesn't make me too foggy brained. Oh, man. Anyway, next question is from Rose at Bell Bottom Blues. And Rose says, hi, new subscriber here. And yeah, Rose, I appreciate you coming to the channel. I did notice your name starting to pop up in the comment sections in the last few videos, and I appreciate you being on the channel. And yeah, so she asks, I would like to know what your favorite American Revolution book is. Okay, so I have a couple of these, Rose. And so if I'm looking for a short history of the American Revolution, it would be Gordon Woods's The American Revolution, A History, and it's like 150 pages or something like that. It's really small, but it is very concise. Matter of fact, if I taught a college course, I would use that book because it hits the political side and the ideological side of the American Revolution very, very well. Another favorite of mine is Robert Middlecoff's The Glorious Cause, which is a chunky monkey that was a part of the Oxford History of the United States series. Very, very well done. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And it's a more, it includes all of it, the ideological, the political, the war, all of the stuff that was going on. And then recently, what was it, 2 years ago maybe, The British Are Coming by Rick Atkinson, which is a military history that I think is extremely good. It is going to be a part of I believe, a trilogy. So it only takes you to the Battle of Trenton, I believe, is where it's from the beginnings to the Battle of Trenton. But Rick Atkinson does a fabulous job of going into detail about not just the major battles that everybody's heard of, but the minor ones. And, and it doesn't matter where you're at, New England or all the way south on the East Coast or up in the mountains. He covers the entire span, and he does a very good job of it. Excuse me. Second question from Rose is, also, can you please recommend a great Benjamin Franklin biography? Thanks so much, Rose. So, Rose, I've read a handful of these that I would recommend. So here comes 5 of them that I would recommend anybody to read. H.W. Brands's biography, it's called The First American. Benjamin Franklin, A Life, I think, or something like that. But The First American's what the biggest part of the title is. And it is a big book, but it reads real fast. And H.W. Brands does a very good job telling the story of Ben Franklin. Highly recommend that one. Walter Isaacson's Ben Franklin, An American Life. I enjoyed that one. There are other people that I have seen on BookTube who did not like that, but I enjoyed it. It's a little smaller one. Not small, but a medium-sized book. I would recommend Edmund Morgan's Ben Franklin. It is a small one, but very good. Edmund Morgan is a very good historian. And then Gordon Wood's The Americanization of Ben Franklin. And it's a medium-sized book, and it was really good. All 4 of those I would highly recommend. And then the 5th one that I would say you need to read, or at least listen to it on audiobook, it's really short, is Ben Franklin's just his autobiography. I thought that was really good because all 4 of these books I mentioned pulled a ton of stuff from that autobiography. So I would even go ahead and read that. The next one is from SUS Prime. He says, who is your second favorite historical character other than Lincoln? Okay, so for me, I have kind of a list of my favorite people to read about. And so obviously, like you said, Lincoln is at the top. George Washington is my number 2 guy. Number 3 is Ben Franklin. And number 4 is Theodore Roosevelt. Those are my top 4 people that I like to read about. They just did so much for history. Now, there are a ton of others that I like to read about, but those are the ones that I probably have the most books about, that I have heavily collected them. All right, so next question is from Lorraine Chandler. Do you agree with the current revisionist view of history, or do you believe the truth, harsh as it may be, should be taught? Depends on which part of the revisionist history you are talking about. This can get into a much bigger discussion. I'll just tell you how I do it in my class. I teach the truth in my class. Okay, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I also show different points of views and different interpretations at the same time. And I show my kids in class how history changes over the years and how it changes with different social changes in our nation. I show them old textbooks from 1900 compared to what our textbooks are now. And you see some huge changes in how things are taught. We talk about just different characters in history and how they have been written about and how they tend to be written about now. So for me, and this will get into one of the other questions. It's going to get into one of these other ones down below. But, as new evidence arises, I always try to add that in. And to me, that's revising. When you have new evidence brought forth or you're adding in more sources, you're going to be revising history a little bit. So I just think that as a teacher, it's my job to teach the facts of history. And so I try to present a full range of ways to look at history, different types of resources. And, we try to use, stuff from George Washington, because I think that's important. And I know things that people are trying to change that. But I also, so people would disagree with me on how I teach George Washington, but at the same time, I also show the slave accounts, the slave narratives, and how, this guy did some pretty great things in history, but he also did some pretty bad stuff. And we look at, all of these founding fathers, if we're using, revolution, because my class will be headed that direction pretty quick. If we're looking at the founding fathers, none of these people were perfect. And so I try to show the good, the bad, and the ugly and make them human and, show that, we got to show respect, but at the same time, we have to show that they weren't perfect. They did some things that were pretty awful. Let's see, this is from Julie. Can you name some authors from your state and books set in your state? And Julie, I had to look it up because I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head. But the one that did pop up, I had one pop up off the top of my head, Bridges over Madison County. Of course, Madison County is pretty close to here. It's just a few counties over. That was a book that was set in our state. And some famous authors, W.P. Kinsella, which he wrote, the movie Field of Dreams. He wrote the book that movie was based off of. And then Herbert Hoover. He was a pretty famous guy, president of the United States. He also did his own writing. So there's a couple for you. There is a long list. I am just not familiar with the names. I read more nonfiction than fiction, so I was not familiar with a lot of the fiction writers. So the next question comes from Book Talks with Mrs. Thomas. She's a fairly new booktuber. She's also a teacher in Pennsylvania, and she does a really nice job with her channel, and go check that out. Her first question is, why did you become a teacher? And I would say, Mrs. Thomas, a little bit, for me, a little bit of it is just to pay it forward. Throughout my life, when I was younger, I dealt with a lot of adversity, and teachers were my rock. They were one of the 3 things that saved my life. And I just have a lot of respect for teachers. And so I wanted to pay that back. They saved my life. And so I wanted to, try to save other people's lives in, all those little ways that you can. And I also love history. I think I was talking about this in the first part 1 video. Where else can you get a job to do what you like? I love history, and I get to share it with kids. I get to hang out with kids all day. So that would be probably why one of the reasons I became a teacher. Why did I become a booktuber? Okay, so for me, becoming a booktuber was because my daughter a couple years ago she was in her junior year of high school, and I wanted to make that connection with her. And it was the second half of her junior year, and I wanted something that we could just do together, that we could experience together, that we could share our thoughts, share what's going on with our channels and stuff, because she's got a channel as well where she sings, does her music, and she does these little vlogs and stuff like that. And so I got her to get in on some of my book videos, and those were some of my, if you ask about my favorite videos that I've ever done, some of the ones with my daughter have been my favorites. But anyway, I became a booktuber initially to share that time with my daughter. And I also wanted to share my life in books and just share, get different ideas for books, be able to talk books, all that kind of stuff that typical booktubers do. I'm not expecting to get 1 million subscribers. That is not on the horizon. Very well aware of that. That is not my goal. My goal is just to be a part of a community that is kind, that is willing to just share their life with each other, share their books with each other, all that kind of stuff. And so that's why I became a booktuber, and it's been everything that I've wanted it to be. What is the strangest comment you've received? The strangest comment that I have received, in my opinion, and I'm guessing some of you may agree with me, is when they leave those video links in your comments section about go watch this video, and it's some girl that's not dressed appropriately, and it's obviously a video in a channel that you shouldn't get on. And that has been the strangest thing to me, because I'm just like, why in the world do you put that on my channel? I'm about books. And so, yeah, anyway. And I know there's been many of you that have experienced that too. It's weird. Anyway, what's your favorite or your funniest teacher, parent, BookTube memory? All right, so my very first year teaching at this school, I had my principal's son in class, and they were in 6th grade. And of course, as a new teacher, you're always nervous about everything, or a new teacher to the school, you're always nervous about anything. And the desks that we had, you got a metal framework that the desk is made out of, and then you've got the what is it called? It's not slate, but it's whatever the seat and the desk part are made of. And this boy, he was sitting, middle schoolers are squirrely, by the way, if you did not know that. And he's sitting here, and he started putting his arm down between where that bar and the seat ran. He's putting his arm in there, and he got stuck. And we had to call the janitor and take the seat apart in order to get him unstuck. And this was the principal's kid. And I was so nervous that I was going to get in trouble. I don't know why, because I didn't do anything wrong. It was just a knothead thing that a middle schooler had done. It really wasn't even a big deal, but the fact that his arm got stuck and he couldn't get done or undone, that was funny to me. My favorite, my funniest parent memory. Oh gosh, there are so many, and the one that I want to share, I probably shouldn't, so I'm gonna move on. And my funniest BookTube memory. I don't know if I have any like super funny BookTube memories. I got a video that I made with my daughter, so maybe I can put this one as my parent one also. But we were talking about in one of the videos, it was one of the tags, the second tome around tag, maybe that was it. Anyway, I did the video with Crimson, and we were talking about, do you like to smell your books or something like that was the question. And I had just got done reading a memoir, or no, it was a mini biography. That's what it was. It was a smaller biography, and the book just smelled horrible. And in the video, we smelled it, and we got to laughing so hard we couldn't stop laughing, and I had tears coming out of my eyes and everything. And so yeah, that's probably one of my funniest memories as a parent or booktuber. Next question, and we're almost done here, is from Freeman Friday. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. Enjoy the channel, and thank you. I appreciate that. How do you teach the ugly parts of American history to your students? All right, so again, this kind of ties in with that earlier question. I use the primary sources. I let the history do the talking. I don't necessarily try to sway their opinion, because if I'm using the primary sources, I don't really have to. We've been studying slavery in this last month, and the ugliness of slavery. And so I've used primary sources. I used a lot of Equiano's, part of his biography. I used slave codes from the state of Virginia, and again, later we'll go to some from South Carolina. I use video that shows all the places that the slave trade happened. Later on in class, we'll use Frederick Douglass's autobiography, the first one. Maps, population statistics. I just present them the information, and they're pretty quick to make their own opinion. I don't necessarily have to try to force them one way or the other, which is good. And it's good that they have a soft spot in their heart and they can see wrong. So that's how I teach the ugly parts of history. I let their innocence figure things out, if that makes any sense. It was it last year, maybe 2 years ago when I was teaching Frederick Douglass, and we were reading through it in class. And, it was a lot of Equiano. It was a lot of Equiano. We were reading it in class, and we were talking about when the slaves got off the ship and they were sent to the holding pens where they would be sold to the slave owners. And the slave owners were coming through, and they were picking through the slaves. And around here in rural Iowa, everybody's pretty familiar with livestock auctions and livestock shows at like the county fair and stuff like that. Everybody's pretty familiar, and I always kind of tie it into there. And we look at how the humans were treated just like animals are today in a county fair. And we got to talking about that, and then we got to talking about just the realities of what was about to happen and the splitting of families and all of that kind of stuff. I had a girl start crying in class, and I got worried at first, and I was like, oh no, why is she crying? But then it dawned on me, no, don't be worried. That's her soft heart. That's her innocence, and she has taken in the information and personalized it, internalized it, and which is what we want as history teachers. And so that's how I teach the ugly parts of history. I just present the facts, because I think that's part of my job. I got other parts of my job, but that's a big part of my job as a history teacher. Present the facts, and then teach the kids how to create their own opinions. And I don't know how anybody could come up with a different, or, you know, slavery was ugly. It was evil. I don't know how anybody could come up with another opinion. And so, you know, when I present the facts, kids latch on to that. All right. So the last question is from Peg at the History Shelf. And she says, love seeing your channel approach the 1K mark, Bill. So deserved. So she says, my question is kind of fun. If you could be any one Civil War general, who would you be and why? Now, Peg, I got to thinking about this, and there's so many ways to approach this this question. And so for me, knowing how I am, I don't think I would be, first of all, I would not be good in war. I think my nerves, I would probably have a nervous breakdown. So just to throw that out there, I don't think I would be a good soldier. But if I had to change places, I picked Joshua Chamberlain. You know, he was a teacher from Maine, so there's a little bit of a connection there. He was a hero. He was brave. But he wasn't like loud and rambunctious. He was low key. But when, you know, the time was needed for him to step up and do what he needed to do, he did it without hesitation. He did it. And, you know, everything I've read about him has been good. I don't think I've read anything bad or negative about him. He led a pretty upstanding life. And so, yeah, I think that's who I would want to be. And of course, he was involved in one of the most important key battles of the Civil War, which was Gettysburg. And I've been there, been to the spot where Joshua Chamberlain had his stand with the 20th Maine and held the Union lines and held the left flank of the Union lines. And I've been there, or not done that. I wasn't involved. Not that old. But I've been there and visited that. And so I just truly appreciate him. So Joshua Chamberlain, that's who I picked, Peg. So anyway, BookTube, this video's probably went on long enough. I thank you for watching. I thank you guys all for subscribing. I thank you for your participation in my videos and in my channel. Thank you to all of those people I've been doing buddy reads with. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. And yeah, let's just keep the channel growing. That's awesome. So thank you for watching, and until next time, happy reading.